Welcome to another episode of the True You podcast. My name is Bill Tierney, and this is my co-host, Dr. Martin Kettlehead. Marty,
Hey, good afternoon.
good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever you're listening to this and watching it. We don't have a guest today. We've had lots of wonderful guests recently. I think that, in fact, I want to say in the last 8 weeks, Marty and I have only had a conversation without a guest one time. So if you are someone that's interested in having a conversation with us about the true you, we'd love to talk with you, whether you're a therapist, a counselor, a coach, a practitioner, or just someone who otherwise has an interest in discussing this topic, the true you, or anything related to it. We'd love to talk with you. So please reach out to us and look into show notes, and you'll find a link to a form there that you can fill out and let us know who you are and what you'd like to talk about. So, as usual, Marty and I begin our conversation prior to every session. And when we have a guest, that conversation goes much differently than it did today and than it has for a while. But essentially, it's, hey, what do you want to talk about? And so we both had something in mind. And Marty, you started first, and then I realized as you started talking about what you'd like to talk about, that there was some relationship between that and what I want to talk about. So how about you get started?
Okay. Well, our interest in this podcasting is in the true you, in being our truth, in living in a way that is natural, is one way that I think about it, right? What your truth, like the tulip blooms in accord with its nature. And so being the true you is living in accord with your nature. Is one way to think about it. And I've been noticing how a lot of the expression of our true selves is hampered right now because of there are a number of factors contributing to it, but the environment of cancellation in the media and in social media and in conversations at the drugstore even is so it if you say one word that is something that doesn't fall into the other person's camp, they're just like, cancel you. I don't want to hear it, right? And so
Is that what you mean by cancel? Like in a conversation, they would cut off the conversation. That means cancel, or like you're out of my life, cancel,
or you're fired, cancel, or we're no longer going to broadcast your television show that you wrote, canceled, like that. Yes.
I see. Yeah. And do you think this is new? Do you think that what's happening in the world right now, or what's happening in culture right now, that this is a new phenomenon, or is this something that's happened
It's
all
not
along?
brand new, but it's definitely much more heightened than I remember politicians getting on TV who were on opposite camps, but they could talk about that. You would have talk shows where people
Right.
actually discussed issues, and and it was in a normal tone of voice, and everybody went home having learned something and bettered themselves for the exposure to each other. And nowadays, it's that's so rare. It's much more just like either you're black or you're white with me, and there's no gray. And the reason I find that concerning, well, there are several, but with regard to the true you, is that people can't. I mean, I feel like I've been slowly canceling or allowing myself to be canceled because I don't want to offend those people, so I won't bring this up. Or I know that it's going to take too much explanation. They're not going to sit and listen, so I don't bring it. So I'm canceling myself because I don't want to say something that's going to get me in trouble, or get me hurt, or have me lose my livelihood. Right?
Yeah. You're canceling yourself. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And so tie this in with the true you.
Well, we lose track of the true self when we're preoccupied, and this is where it overlaps with the topic that you brought up, where it over, where like, well, I've got to respect their belief, for example, that uh, Hamas's attack on Israel is absolutely, like there's just no response except to cancel Hamas. Like that's just the logic of it. And so if you say, well, wait, well, both sides need to look at themselves and like you get, I've been canceled for that very statement that I made on this podcast.
You've been canceled because you made that statement. Someone called you on it. Oh,
Yes.
really?
Yes. Two people.
Said that they argued with the point that you're making, which is that maybe there's other options besides going to war in response to that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The hot topic.
It's a very hot topic. And that's just an example. I mean, this comes up around Black Lives Matter issues. It comes up around vaccines. Like you're just either on one side or the other. And there's no, so like somebody who's a scientist who's very well versed in vaccines and speaks up to say, wait, the science on that study that came out and that influenced all of us getting vaccines during that, there were some problems with it. That person is now canceled for being anti-vax, and that's not the case at all. So we're all starting to hold back or to express ourselves through these weird angles. Like now you got, people who are liberal getting on very conservative radio to talk about it because that's the only place that their discrimination of their point of view is going to be heard, and then it's misappropriated. So we're not getting to be our truth because of the environment, the belief environment.
I think of people like Pete. Actually, I can't think of too many more people other than Pete Buttigieg who courageously, it appears to be that it would require courage, courageously goes into what appears to be the lion's den as a liberal into the conservative talk shows and on Fox, and seems to hold his own quite well in terms of not getting rattled by the extreme, what appear to be provocative questions and statements by the interviewer, and in fact is able to take those questions and comments and then speak intelligently about them because he's got the facts. He's done, and he's quite logical in acknowledging there's a reason why there's extreme conservatism and there's extreme liberalism, and somehow can stay calm. And what we would say in the IFS circles, self-led, apparently. He appears to be quite self-led, even in the face of intentional, provocative conflict.
Mm-hmm.
What if we could all do that? What if we all were committed to being in wonder and curiosity and interest, so that, as you were saying about before, about that there used to be talk shows where presidential candidates or political opponents could be on the same show, the same platform, and have reasonable and respectful conversations where they represented their positions without attacking each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't, I haven't seen much of that at all in the last 8, 9, 10 years.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now, I mean, I love the the feeling of when you say, well, what if we had a world where everyone was, walking around with wonder? Yes, that would be great. Of course. And, and I think we're, at least people like you and I, are working toward that world. But I suspect that we'll, be asymptotically, doing so for a long time to come.
What was that word? What did you just say? Asymptotically?
Yeah, an asymptote approaches and approaches and approaches, but never meets the other line.
Oh, I see. Yes. I've
It's
never heard that word before.
infinitely getting closer, but never actually being the same.
Right. Yeah. So if you cut this distance in half and then cut that distance in half and cut that distance in half, you can always cut it in half and still not arrive.
That's true too. Right. Exactly. I think that observation, that hope-filled vision brings up for me, like I feel like I respond with like, well, okay, but realistically, we've got to deal with the fact that we can't just make that happen. You can't, like make everybody wondrous.
It's not a reality.
Right.
Why isn't it? What prevents that? Because I really believe, and I don't need to be right about this. I'd like to be, but I I don't need to be. That our default state is to be loving and generous,
Mhm.
and in that space, in that state of being, then what I'm suggesting as a possibility would flow naturally. To be
Yes.
able to be in wonder and to have uh, respectful debate, so that those that are engaged in that debate, as well as those that listen to it and consider the points that are made, can make decisions from informed information, uh, and data and considerations, not from being triggered by fear or anger, but from logical discourse.
Mhm.
And yeah, I believe what would be required for that would be sufficient amounts of love and generosity, those default states. So, what gets in the way of it? Can we assume that I'm accurate there? That our default state is to be loving and generous.
Well, yes and no. And here's what I mean. Yes, that's the way we're born, but no, we have this other part of us that develops in the small self, the personality, the the one who holds beliefs and prejudices and grudges and has regrets and things that it gets anxious about. Like, and that is also a natural part of being human.
It is based on experience and based on limited access to the truth.
Mhm.
These conclusions that we draw that result then in fears and anxieties and angst and beliefs and values that are misaligned with reality. Uh, those are developed under pressure. My point is that our default state is and remains loving and generous. That what you're describing is our survival reactions to threats that become just automatic habits of thinking and beliefs and reactions.
Mhm.
Uh, So maybe that's the answer to the question that I was asking: is what gets in the way of this respectful discourse, logical, respectful discourse? What gets in the way of being loving and generous these fears and these unresolved things that have happened in the past.
Exactly, exactly. And that is, I mean, in all the major religions, all the major you know, theories of psychology, this is a part of being human. And one of the things that interests me about that is that the stronger, see, I think that we live in an environment now where there's a strong tendency to protect that, the small self. And it hides a major part of who we also truly are, which is, members of the same group, you know, the sharers of this earth, right? The community, right? That agrees or on certain things like traffic rules and you know national defense and taking care of the poor and like those kind educational like institutions, those crumble away when there's so much emphasis on survival.
Yeah. Yeah. Survival of the fittest. Right.
Yeah,
Becomes individuals rather than a community.
right. And I think what's not realized is, well, that isn't our true self. Like you said, our default actually is to be loving and compassionate. And we're not, a lot of people are not getting to be their true self because of this heightened, need to survive the cancellation culture.
Let's look at what we all know, and in the United States, anyhow, about. And as time goes on, it's maybe a little harder to recognize and even be reminded of this. But let's take the world wars and the depression that occurred between. I don't know, when did World War One start? 1917 or something like that. Maybe 1920, somewhere in there. And then I
No,
believe,
it was in the teens. You're right. Mhm.
okay. And then the Second World War ended in, I want to say 1947,
Five.
1945. Okay. And then sandwiched right in between that is the Great Depression. And so if we were to focus, and I'm not saying there's a relationship, although I'm sure there is, but I'm not making the point that there's a relationship between those wars. But the people that lived in those times from, let's say, 1915 to 1945, during that 30-year period of time, especially the adults that lived in that period of time, they formed survival reactions to surviving the loss of the loved ones that went over and fought in the war and died. The ongoing threat that that we as a country might be bombed and attacked, at which we in fact were at Pearl Harbor. Uh, the economy completely demolishing.
And on 9/11.
Well, again, yeah, we advance forward now another 65 years. It happens again in 9/11 in that way. But if we focus just on the depression, the adults that were working to survive and help their families to survive during that time learned to pinch a penny. They learned to be real frugal and conservative. And there's not too many still alive from that time, but those that I remember from that survived that Great Depression, they never got past. Most of them never got past being penny pinchers, about being frugal and being concerned and worried that whatever they might have accumulated might just evaporate overnight, which is exactly what happened to most people.
Then it's interesting. I just over the weekend I visited the graves of my grandparents on my mom's side, and my grandfather was a teenager and fought in the trenches in World War One in France.
Wow, wow,
And
wow.
came back, married my grandmother, lived through the Depression, had two daughters. And his wife, my grandmother, she worked in as a secretary. They used to call them back then. I guess we'd say admin now at the naval base, Great Lakes Naval Base in just north of Chicago. And my grandfather worked in a grocery store. Like a mom and pop kind of grocery store where you have that sliding,
Yeah, yeah.
ladder that you climb up to get the canned goods down and deliver them to the people in Glencoe, Illinois. So they were both like middle class, hardworking people, and they saved and saved and saved until they could buy a house on the other side of the tracks where the nice houses were. Right.
Yeah.
And so I knew firsthand people like those you're describing.
The values and the beliefs and the fears that they developed going through those hardships got passed on to the next generation, and the next and the next and the next. And then of course they were manifested in various different ways. Like maybe the next generation or the second generation beyond the scarcity mindset, let's say, or worldview. Uh, by the time, from what I understand, by the time I was born, 10 years after World War II, the United States was top of the world, prosperous, lots of abundance. I mean, things had switched overnight. And so there was even a greater clarity about the contrast between that worldview from the Depression and the worldview of the victorious United States coming out of World War II. Uh, and every generation has those beliefs and those values and those fears that and concerns that they pass on to their next generation.
Mm-hmm.
So now here we are in 2025, and we've experienced all of the generation before us has been passed on, passed on, passed on. And as children, we don't have a discerning muscle until we're what, 4 or 5, at least 4 or 5 years old. And it doesn't really fully develop until we're about 8, where we can kind of choose for ourselves, is this valid or is this true? But by then we're already 3-year-old age.
We don't even know that we have a self other
That's
than
right.
until like 5 or 6.
We don't know that. You're right. Exactly. We don't see ourselves as a separate self. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And then by the time we're 7, 8 years old, then now we can begin to discern and choose. But by then, most of our belief system, most of our values, most of our fears have been developed, and they're cooked right in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of the adolescence, the teenage years, the rebelliousness probably has everything to do with I now have a brain where I can discern and choose for myself, and yet I'm still under the thumb and control of the generation that's providing for me. And so now there's this conflict, and by the time we survive our teenage years and go out into the world trying to make it for ourselves, we have this mixed bag. I'll speak for myself. I had this mixed bag of, boy, I sure don't want the values and beliefs and fears of my parents. And I certainly don't want their habits. I don't want to live the way that they lived. So I'm not going to. But that left this huge void that I had no way to fill. I had no idea then how would I live? I'm not going to live that way. I'm not going to believe that way. I'm not going to have those fears. So how will I live? And as it turns out, and it took me years to find this out and to realize it, I did live my life according to those values, those fears, and those beliefs
Mm-hmm.
until I went through, till I got to the place where I learned how to explore and inquire and choose for myself so that I could let go of those old values and have clarity about what I wanted to replace them with.
I think that it's very interesting what you're pointing to, and I'm thinking as you're speaking that this disallowing of gray discussions, but like the cancel culture that makes things black or white relative to any term they might pronounce, is going to affect the next couple of generations.
Sure. Absolutely.
And we could look at this, what caused it to arise. You point to like attitudes around money come from the depression. This cancel culture, we could look at, that's a great question to ask, like where did that come from? But I fear that it's going to have us not able to be our true selves for a couple of generations.
I want to assert that challenge has always been there. The challenge of asserting our true selves or even knowing what that would look like or feel like to do so faces every generation.
I agree. But I do think it's particularly heightened.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We have such division.
I saw a guy and a woman, an Arab and a Jew, interviewed in the same conversation recently. And they were both like, yeah, it used to be that our village was a mix of people and we were all very happy to be mixed. And that's not at all the case, right?
I'm curious about what has inspired this interest in cancel culture for you, Marty.
A couple of incidents where I got canceled is part of it. And then also I'm leading a book club that's reading a book called No Apologies, which is about cancel culture.
Are you in a profession that helps people discover, cultivate, and express their true selves? Are you a coach, a therapist, a spiritual leader, a health professional, scientist, writer, speaker, or other specialist that recognizes the power and value of authenticity? Would you like to be a guest on our podcast? We're looking for guests to bring on the show to expand this exploration of the true you. You'll find a link in the show notes to use to introduce yourself and start that conversation. Oh, okay.
And then
Tell me about the book.
the author, Catherine Brodsky, who she's posting on Substack like 2 or 3 times a day, by the way. She's a very prolific writer and very powerful writer. She's, her point of view, I haven't finished the book yet, but it seems to be like the only answer is to keep talking. Don't restrict free speech, keep talking, right? And I think she's right about that. But it raises this question for me, like, what about that layer of our true self that is compassionate and loving, that can work together on solutions, that can find agreements or consensus in order to move forward. And she doesn't address that. And that's my worry, because otherwise we're left in this Hobbesian state of everybody's against everybody. And of
Right.
course, there's no forward motion, and
Mhm.
just finding it hard to see how we're going to get out of this.
Yeah. Tell me the name of that book again.
No apologies.
No apologies. All
Broad,
right.
like
We'll make sure we have Catherine Brodsky.
Yeah.
Brodsky. We'll put a link for that in show notes. Are you able or willing to talk about the being canceled?
Sure.
What happened?
On this, well, one of them was on this, it might have been the leadership podcast that we used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the general topic, but what I've been nailed to the wall on by 2 different people. They found this passage where I was expressing how frustrated I was that with these Jewish friends, I was unable to, look at the whole issue. It was just like, no, it's either black or white. You're either for us or against us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and my speech on that in social media was, like, I was equated with a Jew hater.
Mm. And your point was that maybe there are other options other than killing people,
Yes,
which means that you're a Jew hater.
that's right. And Brodsky gives lots of examples of this. Almost every chapter takes somebody as a focal point who has suffered this very sort of phenomenon. Like a scientist, I mentioned this one earlier, who saw how we could improve vaccines. But as soon as he spoke up against the current ones, he was labeled an anti-vaxxer, and that he's not that at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are millions of stories like this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Where just broad assumptions are made to the extreme, and yeah,
Right? So the truth doesn't come out.
Well, and I'm imagining how painful that must have been for you to be canceled in that way, and how frustrating it must have been to not be understood and then not be given a chance to clarify your intent, what you intended by what you said.
All of that is true.
Yeah. And so human beings have a tendency to want to protect themselves once they've been hurt. And I think that's the point one of the points you've been trying to make here is that the way we protect ourselves is that we don't show up as authentically as we otherwise would when we show up authentically and then get canceled because of it.
Yeah, I mean, Darryl Davis asked Klansman. He's a black musician who was playing in the South, and they hung out with him after his band played in their bar, and started hanging out with him, and he's black, and so he's asking, like, why do you lynch people like me, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do that? And well, I had to join the Klan because they were the only people who could ensure me my job. Like, the other administration, the liberals, they were going to cancel my job. I had to side with or well, my dad and my grandfather, everybody in my family, if I hadn't been a Klansman too, I'd have been kicked out of the family. They all had a story to tell, you know, why they were a Klansman. Of course, the beauty of the story is that Darryl Davis, through his befriending them and hearing them out and courageously, a la Pete Buttigieg, those guys, a lot of them, they gave up their roads. They said, we're quitting the Klan because now we know, you're a normal human being, and our motivations are no longer valid.
Yeah, yeah. I can no longer live in this othering belief that now I see as is not is true. It's not valid.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, and I know it happens all the time to those that just speak the truth openly. And I noticed that that on certain topics I will get guarded. I will get really guarded, and I haven't been consciously aware of my fear of being canceled. My fear is not quite so deep as that. My fear is about being criticized
Mhm.
and judged, and misunderstood, and eventually it goes all the way down to being canceled. I can see that. Yeah. I can tell you that I speak far more honestly and openly than I ever have in my entire life. And I'll also acknowledge that I'm I'm somewhat careful sometimes.
Somewhat
Careful.
careful, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Yeah. I mean, I think that the true self will prevail. And I'm just noticing, not only in these incidences that I've, been in, but, friends telling stories, and sharing, about how they made one simple statement, on Facebook, and boom, they got completely piled on, and they had canceled their own account and go out and come back as somebody else.
Hmm.
So yeah, there are a lot right now of forces making it hard for us, um to be that, like you said, the way we were naturally born, our default way of being.
Yeah. Yeah. So fear of being attacked, being hurt, of being misunderstood, of being blamed, of being accused, and of being canceled. Those are all reasons that it's harder to show up as our true authentic self. And if we're not showing up as our true authentic self, or showing up protected, then it's going to be very difficult to keep talking when we're in a conversation with someone who so vehemently opposes your position.
Yes. Yeah. And makes life difficult for you, if not just unpleasant, to be called names, also difficult to maintain your job, and pay your bills, and be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I want
So
to,
I I I I I think that probably, a combination of, what Brodsky's saying is keep expressing, don't hold back. That's canceling yourself. But at the same time, you know, getting in touch with that default love that you are, and fearlessly bringing that forward. That's probably what will change things, is the more and more people source themselves in that way.
and what are some ways to source yourself when in the presence of fear, worry, and concern about being canceled, judged, misunderstood, and criticized?
Mhm.
What are some ways to source yourself, as you say?
Well, I'm a big believer in, vision boards.
Oh yeah, tell
I
me
think
more.
I think it makes a really huge difference to have a picture, make a picture of the future that you're living toward. And as you're going through your day, live from that place, from that future, from that vision that you have. And I mean, like, actually put it up on the wall, cut out pictures, draw pictures, maybe some words, but mainly make a visual display of the future you're into, and live from that future.
I love that. And some, can I add to that just as an idea here?
Sure.
So that future, if it's not already being lived, is going to come into opposition uh, with a burden, with a burdensome belief system,
Mhm.
worldview, as we were talking about before we hit record today, like a worldview that uh, is determined by values, beliefs, fears, uh, and expectations, really, of ourselves and of the world. So, if the vision that you're describing, one method of having like a vision board, thinking of the future that you want, you hold that in front of you every day, that's going to challenge any belief that's living inside that says that that's not possible. That
Mhm.
says there's another way to be that is not that.
Mhm.
And that's what I was talking about this morning before we hit record was my recent experience with a client with a unburdening of a
Uh,
legacy burden
I see.
that was just handed off to them by their parents. You always have to watch out. People are going to take advantage of you. So that's an example of a belief. You got to be
Yes.
careful. Don't let people take advantage of you.
And I think that's one of those beliefs that I think the current the 20 somethings are going to pass on to their kids out of their experience of this beginning of the 21st century.
Yeah, and understandably, uh, given everything that we've experienced, we can draw we. It's easy to draw the conclusion is that since everywhere you look, it's difficult to find anybody that you can trust to tell the truth.
Mhm.
Therefore, don't trust anybody.
Mhm.
But is it true that you can't trust anybody?
No.
It's not. So if you live your life that in a fashion where you can't trust anybody, then what makes it possible are things like connection, true connection to anybody. If I
So
can't trust anybody, then I can't connect with anybody. If I
right.
can't connect with anybody, then I'm all alone. And if I'm all alone, I rightfully am scared to death
You can't
because
get anything
we need
done.
each other.
You can't accomplish anything either.
Well, we need each other though, and we need each other. If I'm all alone, I mean, if I absolutely am all alone, I don't know how to generate electricity. So I got no internet. I can't talk with you on Zoom. I got no light to be able to see my kids.
If you can't trust anybody else, how can you drive down the street?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so this is going to generate all kinds of fears. If I can't trust anybody, then is somebody going to break into my house? Is somebody going to take advantage of me? Is this deal that's being offered actually what's going to happen? Is this food that I'm about to eat actually been procured in such a way that it's safe to eat? So very, very quickly and very easily, these kinds of beliefs, you can't trust anybody, which is a belief that's passed on to a child in hopes that you're going to be able to have that child be careful and cautious in a dangerous world, turns into a disabling, paralyzing belief as an adult. And so that's a great example of a legacy burden. And if we can find ourselves into a position or find a way to be supported in this, what there is to do with this, in addition to that vision board of yours that you're talking about, I love those as well, is to have a logical exploration, inventory taking of what are my beliefs? What are my values?
Mhm.
What are the beliefs, the values, and the fears that are running my life? What are these values, beliefs, and fears that I bow down to and make sure that I accommodate in my life? And then go down the list and look at each and every one of them. Look at where they started and why it made sense to begin to have those beliefs in the first place. And now compare that to today and ask yourself, how valid and true is it now?
How do you get started on this? This sounds like an amazingly valuable exercise, but I'm imagining myself sitting down and going, "Well, I don't know. Those are like so basic. Those beliefs in me, I can't even name them. Like, how do you get
Well,
into?"
Well, one way to do it would be to have a conversation with someone who could be more objective and listen as you talk,
Hmm.
and then point and reflect back to you. This is what I'm hearing.
Hmm.
And, people like you and I listen to this all the time.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so with my clients, if a client comes to me and says, my life's not working, and I suspect whether they believe this, whether they suspect this or not, I suspect that maybe the reason it's not working is because the beliefs, values, and fears that are running my life are no longer valid. Whether they know that or see that or not, part of my job is to help them to see that. If
Yeah.
your life's not working, it's probably because your values, your worldview is no longer valid, if it
Hmm.
never was.
Hmm.
And so if they're in a place where they're ready to take that on, and it's a scary conversation to have, because if what I believe to be true, I find out is not, then what in the world am I going to do about, what is true then? What is valid? Where do I stand?
Uh-huh.
It's a
Uh-huh.
scary place. That's why it's so beautiful to bring in that vision at the very same time. And there's a question that comes out of the work of Byron Katie. Who would I be without this thought? Let's expand that. Who would I be without this fear? Who would I be without this belief system?
Hmm.
Who would I be without this value? And if and the other side of that question is, who am I with this value? Who am I with this belief? Who am I with these fears?
Hmm.
Exploring all of that will really begin to lay out on the table. This is what I'm working with.
Hmm.
Given these fears, beliefs, and values, this is what I'm working with. This is who I am. Now, can I imagine who I'd be without them? Maybe I'd have that joy. Maybe I'd have that love. Maybe I'd have that generosity. Maybe I'd be connected again. Maybe I'd be enthused about life again.
Hmm.
That on a vision board, very specifically reflecting what would make me feel joyous, loving, generous. What would that look like? And who would I be doing that with?
Makes me think that part of if there's someone listening who wants to get started on this, even before they call us to be the listener, the observer or the witness of that process, um, you might start to look at where you experience like tension or the opposite. Like, oh, I really like being around that group of guys. Why? Because they all believe blah blah blah, right? Or it's always hard for me to be with these people or to do this activity. Why? Because it's up against my belief that blah blah blah. So you might look, where you're experiencing, that kind of tension in life, or the opposite, relief. And what is the belief? What is the belief there that you're living by?
Another word to use as you're looking would be, what are the rules that are running my life? What rules am I living by? Those rules will be backed up by a fear, a value, or a belief. Some of those, by the way, fear, but value, belief, sometimes those are just different descriptions of the very same idea. I'm not enough. Let's just to go with that one. I'm not enough is actually a belief. I'm not enough is also a fear. I'm not enough is also a value. And therefore, I'm not enough is a rule to live by. How's and if I'm not happy with my life and I believe I'm not enough, that's a great place to start right there. Who
Mhm.
would I be with it? Who am I with this belief I'm not enough? What does my life look like? How do I suffer believing this? And
Mhm.
then who would I be without the thought? Who would I be if I didn't believe that I was enough? What if I actually just by default knew that I was enough rather than believing that I'm not?
Mhm.
What if I wasn't suffering all the time? Then what might life look like? The
Mhm.
combination of those two perspectives, I guess, brought together, puts you right in the middle of the turbulence of a wild river that you're going to have to ride for a little while to get it all worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I recognize as you're talking that, I have beliefs like injustice and
Mhm.
that it prevail. That brings up this conversation today in me because I see that not happening right now. And, so but I come out of that with that recognition going, okay, then what there is to do is keep speaking justice.
By the way, what is the belief about justice? So you say you believe in justice. What does that mean? You believe that justice is possible? You believe that, okay. But
Mhm.
and do you also have an opposing belief that justice is not happening right now?
Mhm.
So it's possible, and it's not happening right now. There's that creates that tension inside. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that probably results in a motivation to speak about it, even if somebody's going to cancel you for
Hence this podcast,
it. Yeah,
this episode. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. No,
Okay.
there are other ones too, like, I believe, and not many people that I know would say this actually, but I believe that, uh, you know, religion is a moderating force in society. Now, most of the people I know would go, religion is it's the problem. That's what's in the way. But I think that religion gives us uh, it fills social needs. It gives us a higher place to look for answers to these more fundamental questions that were survival questions, right? Um, and 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 also it gives us a hopeful, you know, way to come at things. So I believe in the importance of religion. I'm not promoting any particular religion, and I'm definitely not promoting religion that makes people more narrow minded. But I think it has these values.
If what you mean by religion, ideally, is a way to organize around higher ideals, then
Hmm.
I'm right there with you.
Hmm.
But if that way to organize around higher ideals now becomes like cultish, you must believe as I believe. Now we got a problem. Now it's no longer serving us.
Exactly.
It's got to
Exactly.
be it's got to be. I think if it's going to be religion, if it's an organization around higher ideals, I'd like to be part of an organization around higher ideals where I get to decide what those higher ideals are, rather than to have them imposed upon me, because that's what I'm recovering from
And
now.
my and mine is somewhere it's neither of those. It's not imposed upon me. It's not just like me coming up with them. It's something else. It's more of a like the work of IFS, which is getting in touch with a truth that we share.
Yeah, discovering and recognizing what's true. Yeah. I don't think that I probably have it in me to come up with these ideals on my own, but I certainly know them when I see them.
Some people do. Our current president thinks he can just make up ideals on his own for us. Like he really believes that.
He apparently does. Yeah. Yeah. On that note, we are about to get canceled. So let's go ahead and wrap. We're out of time. I need to get ready for my men's group.
Thank you for
And
indulging me. And I hope that the discussion of this is useful to our listeners.
I hope so too. I've enjoyed it. And those that enjoyed the episode will continue to listen most likely. And those that didn't will move on to something else. And isn't it great we get to choose? All right,
And
Marty, great to talk to you. Talk to you next week.
bye.
We appreciate who you are, that you would be listening to this podcast, and want to acknowledge all those parts of you that yearn for the experience of the true you.
If you like this episode, click like, share it with others, and be sure to subscribe. Listen again next week for the newest episode.
Check show notes for a transcript and a link to resources, including a link to let us know if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for listening and going on this journey with us back to the true you.